Hello, everyone. So, the question being raised here cuts straight to the heart of something many people are increasingly unwilling to ignore: the gap between public image and personal conduct. So, when Prince Harry is described as man of faith, it invites scrutiny not because faith itself should be polished, but because the label carries weight. So, it suggests a commitment to values like humility, honesty, compassion, and self restraint. Yet, the growing narrative surrounding William, fueled by reports, interviews, and persistent commentary, paints a far more complicated and too so deeply contradictory picture. So, at the center of this tension is the allegation of violence, the claim mostly notably brought into public conversation through Prince Harry's own account that William physically attacked his brother during an argument linger heavily over any discussion of character. So for many observers, this is not a minor detail that can be brushed aside as a private family dispute. Instead, it raises serious questions about temperament, self-control, and moral grounding. If true, it's challenged the very essence of what is meant to embody Christian principle, where restraint and forgiveness are not optional ideals but core expectation. So it becomes even more troubling when placed alongside the perception that William harbors deep resentment toward his brother. So the idea that he might be actively involved in briefing against Harry, feeding negative narratives, or allowing them to flourish adds another layer of inconsistency. Faith, particularly Christianity, emphasizes reconciliation, truth, and love for one's family. A pattern of hostility, if it exists, stands in stark contrast to those teaching. So it suggests not a man guided by spiritual discipline, but one entangled in bitterness and image management. The issue of honesty is equally central. The accusation that William participates in or benefits from misleading narrative, so whether direct or indirectly, cuts sharp against the moral framework often associated with religious belief. Because Christianity does not treat truth as flexible or situational, it treats it as scared, lying, manipulation, and strategic silence when it serves a personal interest are all seen as moral failure. So, when critics question William's integrity, they are not merely engaged in gossip. They are pointing out a perceived disconnect between what is professed and what is practiced. So, what makes this conversation more intense is the institutional backing behind William's image. He's not just an individual, he's part of monarchy that has long relied on carefully curated perception. When that machinery promotes him as a figure of stability, duty, even faith, it raises expectation. People are not reacting in a vacuum, they are responding to a narrative that has been deliberately constructed and reinforced over time. So when cracks appear in that narrative, the backlash can be sharp and unforgiving. The frustration expressed by critics often stems from this sense of imbalance. On one hand, there is a polished public persona, measured speeches, charitable engagement, and symbolic gesture. And on the other hand, there is persistent allegation of anger, rivalry, and behind-the-scene maneuvering. The contrast can feel jarring. It creates a sense that the public is being asked to accept a version of William that does not fully align with the story emerging from those closest to him. So the challenge to name a favorite Bible verse while it seemingly trivial on the surface actually speaks to a deeper skepticism. It is not about testing someone's memory or religious literacy. It's about authenticity. People want to know whether the label of a man of faith reflects a guinea inner life or whether it's simply another layer of public relation. Faith, after all, is not just something one claims, it's something one lives. It shows up in action, especially in moments of conflict and pressure. So for critics, the alleged incident with Harry became a defining moment, precisely because it represents such a test. How someone behaves in anger reveals far more about their character than any prepared speech or ceremonial role. So if that moment is marked by aggression rather than restraint, it's become difficult to reconcile with the idea of spiritual maturity. It suggests that the value being promoted publicly may not be deep-rooted internally. And at the same time, the ongoing narrative of division between brothers continues to shape public perception. Family conflict is not unusual, even at the highest level of society. But when it's handled and the extent to which it's allowed to spill into the public sphere matters. So a person grounded faith might be expected to seek reconciliation, to do escalate tension, and to avoid action that deepens wounds when the opposite seems to occur. It's naturally to question about sincerity, and there's also broader cultural concept at play. In an era where audiences are increasingly skeptical of institution and authority figure, claim of moral or spiritual superiority are met with heightened scrutiny. So people are less willing, to accept titles and label at face value. They want consistency, they want accountability, and when they sense a disconnect, they are quick to call it out. So in William's case, this means that every aspect of his public and private behavior is being examined, through a more critical lens. The expectation is not perfection but coherence. If he is presented as man of faith, then his action, especially in moment of conflict, should reflect the core tenet of that faith. When they do not, the criticism is not just inevitable, it is in many ways understandable. Ultimately, the question is not whether William identifies as a believer. That is a personal matter. The question is whether his conduct aligns with the value that identify implies. For many observers, the answer remains uncertain at best and deeply contradictory at worst. The allegation of violence, the perception of ongoing hostility toward his brother, and the question around honesty all contribute to a narrative that feels at all with image being promoted. And that is why the criticism resonates. It is not simply about disliking a public figure. It is not about holding that figure to the standard they are associated with. And when those standards are rooted in something as significant as faith, then the gap between expectation and reality becomes impossible to ignore. Thank you guys. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more updates. We love you and thank you.